Hello, welcome to the Zero Ends channel. Please like and subscribe. Please enjoy our live.
Zero Ends. Welcome, guys. Welcome to another edition, another live stream here on the Zero Ends channel. As you know, I am Zero Ends. Today. Not tonight, but you get what I mean. Hold on. We are going to talk about Black history and the celebration of nearly now a century since its creation by the founder, as you see the thumbnail, Carter G. Woodson. Now, if you're new to the Zero Ends channel, welcome to the Zero Ends channel. It's been a while like everything else, but we're getting back to the fold of things. So, for those that's not familiar with this channel, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Like y'all to hype the video if you catch replay of this. But we're going to play some videos. We're going to look at briefly the life of Carter G. Woodson. And let's be fair honest, before we run the videos, because this is what's the purpose of today's stream, it's now been 100 years since Carter G. Woodson came up with the ideal to have history, Black people, our history, rather is considered FBA or any other label you want to label a lot of Black people in the West. This is history that was created and still uphold not only the West, but globally. And Carter G. Woodson, like many thinkers, writers, and intellect, in his opinion and in his works, want not only our people to appreciate the history that we have created and still provide for the world to consume, but to have more appreciation of our history. And it goes beyond the days of the enslavement process, that we should take pride in everything we have done and contribute to the world. There was a saying going with when Johnny Clark met Arthur Schomburg back in the early 20th century, like 1920s, I believe, when Arthur Schomburg told Dr. John Henry Clark of the time that if you want to know or understand your history, you must go into their history and you'll find your history amongst their history. Now, at the time when I heard Dr. Clark said this years ago, when I came across a lot of information, maybe more than years ago, maybe a decade or two, it kind of resonated with me to know that I'm not going to get a real understanding of where I stand as a Black person in the books of history unless I go through their own history. So like any other people, I got back and went back to basics. And that means I have to read some of these books, watch videos, have a clear appreciation about our history. And I tell you, our history is very fruitful for those that don't know. And there's reasons why now, where we at in our existence, why they try to whitewash and completely erase the contributions of Black people here, not only in America, but globally, for those that not really understand how the game works. So, no further ado, I am going to run some videos and then give commentary, and we'll see how this thing plays out. So my introduction is over. Let's begin. Enjoy, guys.
Number 1. Carter G. Woodson was born on December 19, 1875 in Virginia. Carter G. Woodson's story began in a similar fashion to the countless number of Black people who came of age during the uneasy years of Reconstruction. The son of illiterate, formerly enslaved people, he grew up on a farm near Canton, Virginia, where intensive fieldwork kept him out of school most days and still barely produced enough food to feed the entire family. Woodson took on the jobs that were available to him, including garbage truck driver and coal miner, but he also sought to improve his standing through a relentless desire to learn. Number 2. Dr. Woodson devoted himself to the highest levels of education. Woodson supported himself by working in the coal mines of Kentucky and was thus unable to enroll in high school until he was 20. Carter then enrolled into Frederick Douglass High School in West Virginia. The time he entered high school, Carter graduated in 2 years and later became the school's principal as he worked toward his undergraduate degree at Kentucky Berea College. Carter would eventually graduate from Berea College and became a teacher and an administrator there. After his college graduation from Berea in 1903, Woodson spent time teaching in the Philippines and also traveled visiting the Middle East and Europe. He studied at Sorbonne University in Paris during his travels. When he returned to the U.S., he enrolled at the University of Chicago and received a second bachelor's degree and master's degree in European history in the spring of 1908. That fall, he became a doctoral student in history at Harvard University and went on to earn his PhD in 1912. Woodson became the second Black man to earn a PhD in history from Harvard University after W.B. Du Bois. Most of Woodson's academic career was spent at Howard University, a historically Black university in Washington, D.C., where he eventually served as the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences. Number 3. Dr. Woodson was motivated by white historians' tendency to erase Black history. After Dr. Woodson graduated from a relatively progressive Harvard, he embarked on making the history of Black Americans both visible and appreciated. Contemporary historians at the time were white and had a very narrow scope in their historical narratives, their perspectives limited either intentionally or otherwise. Woodson's determination to shine a light on his predecessors' stories solidified as he recalled the moment when a distinguished professor from his Harvard College days informed his class that the Negro had no history, fueling a deep-seated desire in Woodson to prove him wrong. Number 4. Dr. Woodson published his first book, The Education of the Negro, prior to 1861. Dr. Woodson's first book,
The Education Negro, which I have right here in front of me, but it was not my first book that I read from Carter G. Woodson. I read the most popular, most famous one, in my opinion, that really put him to promise as an author for the world to really consume and know, was The Miseducation of the Negro. That to me set precedence and made an impression on me at the time when someone told me about this book. And I read that book now over like 15 years ago, now I think about it. But it's one of many books someone should own and have in their catalog. A lot of jewels, a lot of information was laid out in that book. But let's continue. And The Education of the Negro came out, what, 1861? All right, let's go.
published in 1915, was on the history of Black American education.
All right, 1915. So that is, in my map, suit me right, 1915. That was a period of 100 and now 11 years ago. Very long time. That's a long time, guys. Very long time ago. Let me check, make sure everything's good. All right, let's keep going.
As he emphasized the importance and power of the Black American story. He also explained why Black history was not being told and detailed how the enslavers are responsible for preventing Black Americans from receiving proper education so as to more easily force them into subordination. He further argued that the perpetuation of this practice and erasure of Black history has benefited white people for centuries. The only way to effectively fight racism, he continued, is to educate the Black community about all that Black people have done for American society, so that this race is no longer regarded as inferior. When researching this topic, Dr. Woodson mentions in the preface that he was particularly inspired by the stories he read and heard over the years about Black Americans who invented and accomplished things even while suffering extreme oppression. Number 5. Dr. Woodson publishes Miseducation of the Negro in 1933. In 1933, Dr. Woodson published his historical and extremely important critique of the American education system that he titled The Miseducation of the Negro. The thesis of Dr. Woodson's book is that African Americans of his day were being culturally indoctrinated rather than taught in American schools. This conditioning caused Black people to become dependent and to seek out inferior positions in the greater American society. The most crucial element in his concept of miseducation hinged on the education system's failure to present authentic African and African American history.
As we do another quick pause for those that are not familiar with Dr. Carter G. Woodson, and I'm going to give you the timeline of the many books that he published. Since the Education of Negro was released in 1915, right? And matter of fact, I might pull that book, make sure that date is correct. The next book didn't come out until, let me see, almost 18 years later. So there was something that was going on during that time that Carter published that book, and eventually, almost 20 years later, he published The Miseducation of Negro. There was something that Carter would notice, not only education in general, but where the Negro was heading and where, in my opinion, we're going at that time, why that book took a little longer for him to publish, in my opinion. Well, let's continue and listen more to this.
The school's curriculum. Woodson found his voice with this sophisticated critique of a post-Civil War education system that was more philanthropic in nature or more focused on training the Negro to work, not educating and empowering him or her to excel. He highlighted America's neglect of purposeful teaching and its embrace of white racist historians who were not genuine in providing an accurate account of America's history that not only included significant contributions from the Black community, but also acknowledged the pain of slavery. His constructive critique gave a lesson on how improving the lives of the poor cannot be done by a bunch of nice people with money, but rather change has to be systemic, radical, and practical. Because as he stated in one of his most famous quotes, when you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. Number 6.
All right, so from what I was looking, I was correct. His most famous work is The Miseducation of Negro. And like I said before, because this book, and I think it was the most controversial book, because really, most Black people and the term Negroes were used besides the word nigga, but Negroes were the more simple word at that time, present an element of Black folks that if you don't understand why you're being miseducated, everything else falls that makes is confusion to you. Self-education, understand who you are, where you are in the place and where you're actually heading is essential for any person or any race, if I'm gonna be honest, existence for their survival. And the excerpt written here was, this is one of the most people well known. As Woodson's argument that the American education system conditions Black Americans to undervalue themselves by centering European achievements while ignoring Africans and Black contributions. The book is still widely quoted and studied today. And now we're at a point now, this book, since its publication, is now thwarting at, my math is right, 93 years old. When in the next 7 more years, it's going to be 100 years since this book was published. Almost a century. Now, I'm not sure where Black people will be at in the next 7 years, either knowing this book or not, but it tells you a testament that the school system or any system that is designed that is not for your preservation but for your demise is not in the business of educating you. And Black people should be knowing this. They still don't understand. They can conceptualize this. So they still not only send their kids to get miseducated, but they really don't really educate the kids for the near future, what is here, what is to come. And that's just the bottom line truth. All right, let's go.
Dr. Woodson drafted and circulated a pamphlet promoting Negro History Week. Meanwhile, Dr. Woodson urged Black schools and organizations to find ways to celebrate the accomplishments of their race. His Omega Psi Phi fraternity brothers responded with the creation of Negro History and Literature Week in 1924, and Woodson soon took the idea to the next level in 1926 when he pioneered the celebration of Negro History Week.
1926. We're in 2026. This has now been a century since he pioneered the idea of Negro Week, or what they call Black History Week. In short, let's go.
designated the second week in February to coincide with the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln on February 12th and Frederick Douglass on February 14th. He would herald the celebration in his Negro History Week circulars, causing a stir in the direction of active participation after mailing them to several black schools, civic organizations, literary societies, and radio stations. As years went on, Dr. Woodson would offer promotional materials to those who agreed to take up the celebration, as well as guidance on how to shape such festivities. One of his early mantras was to not just to emphasize Negro history, but to highlight the Negro in history. Number 7, Negro History Week gained popularity with help from teachers and church leaders. Early Negro History Week celebrations included banquets, speeches, parades, and lectures, many of which were free for the public to attend. The community events caught on with the help of the teachers and church leaders who encouraged involvement, as well as the organizers and featured participants who were expected to generously donate their time to the cause. Several black newspapers also hopped on board with the movement, with the Philadelphia Tribune, the Chicago Defender, and the Tampa Bulletin among some of the biggest and early supporters of the effort. By 1937, Woodson had another means of promoting Negro History Week with the launch of the Negro History Bulletin, a publication that proved more accessible to working-class blacks and children that had a wider and more relatable reach than his scholarly Journal of Negro History. Number 8. Dr. Woodson was disappointed in the school's failure to adopt Black history. Negro History Week became a mainstay in areas with major black populations like New York City, Chicago, Detroit, and Washington, D.C., as well as smaller black communities in the South. Woodson would leverage his Negro History Bulletin to publish the success of the celebrations, as well as the enthusiastic feedback of teachers and volunteers. However, Dr. Woodson wasn't satisfied with the celebration being limited to 7 days out of the year. He hoped that Negro History Week would spark the development of immersive curricula on Black studies in schools around the country, but was disappointed by the failure of schools and administrators to build on his efforts. Woodson continuously found himself fighting an uphill battle pursuit of his goal to promote the study of African American history in schools. He believed that education and increasing social and professional contacts among black and white people could significantly reduce racism and prejudices. Woodson would devote the rest of his life to historical research and work to preserve the history of African Americans as he accumulated a collection of thousands of artifacts and publications. Dr. Woodson died at his home of a heart attack in Washington, D.C. at the age of 74 on April 3, 1950. He is
1950. 1950 is when he died. Oh, sorry, hit that. So if we go back, and let me go back. I'm trying to go back to find some things. Because I'm trying to see when he was born. He was born December, okay, 19, and he died April. So he died, at 74 years of age. So he died just as the 50s just started, the Negro history and all that stuff. Wow. Okay. All right, let's go. All right, let's continue.
Buried at Lincoln Memorial Cemetery in Maryland. Number 9, Black History Month was officially recognized in 1976. It's apparent that Woodson's work with the ASNLH now.
So we look at 50 years after his creation of it, of starting with a week, became an actual whole month dedication in the mid 70s, 50 years later. So we look at the timeline for those that's not really clear about timeline. It was first founded on his mind, and he carried out in the month of February of 1926. That's when it first started, the creation of it, 100 years ago. Then it became a national and recognized month in 1976. So what if you notice the correlation, if people not paying attention, we're looking at the last 50 years since we have Black History Month officially throughout the whole month. But really, in its essence, in its creation, it started a whole century ago. Started in a week. So between 100 years to 50 years from 50 years, we're looking at 150. Or I have to call 50-50. And that's some. This food thought. All right, let's go.
Known as the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, bore fruit through successive generations that made Black studies a staple of most American institutes of higher learning. Furthermore, momentum for Negro History Week continued gathering steam in the following decades as the commemoration of Black contributions became a cultural fixture. President Gerald Ford officially recognized Black History Month in 1976, calling upon the public to seize the opportunity to honor the too often neglected accomplishments of Black Americans in every area of endeavor throughout our history. Number 10. Dr. Woodson dedicated his life to telling the stories of Black Americans. Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the father of Black history, is honored with numerous schools, parks, and buildings across the country bearing his name. Dr. Woodson was also remembered with a U.S. Postal Service stamp in 1984, and his Washington, D.C. home is now a National Historic Site. Many of his publications and foundations are still operational, and his Association for the Study of African American Life and History is still in existence today. It was Dr. Woodson's belief that setting aside a week for studying Black history would build a platform that would make its way into school curriculums across the country and bring light to the many ways that Black Americans have shaped society. And though the nation still has a long way to go, his vision is being realized one step at a time. Black History Month is still celebrated today as activists and leaders work against centuries of discrimination by fighting for Black rights while praising, supporting, and empowering the Black community throughout the month of February. We here at Black Excellence are inspired by Dr. Woodson as we embark on our own crusade to ensure that we preserve the history of Black Americans and leave a digital footprint that narrates our accomplishments and our excellence. We want to thank you all for your support of this channel, since it's important for us to narrate our own stories in our own way.
Yeah.
Like Dr. Woodson, we have found our voice and our passion, and we will work even harder to emphasize and highlight the importance, the beauty, and the power of the Black American story.
I'm
All
saying
right.
we was getting trained by Master Ford, or at least that's
All right. That was that video. Now, the next video I'm going to run is a man that's going to talk about Carter G. Woodson. I think it's more of a documentary or a lecture. Well, let's look into this. And there's some stories that we never knew much from elders that passed down to, I guess, some stories of the days when they knew Dr. Carter G. Woodson, from what I understand. So, no further ado, I'm going to run this video. Enjoy. Let's go.
the folklore goes. Ford, he's never saw Ford sleep. So one night he snuck up to Ford's bedroom and looked through the keyhole to see if he could catch Ford sleep, and there was Ford sitting in a chair in the middle of the room looking back through the keyhole at him. Elijah Muhammad was the best storyteller there was. In other words, you're not going to catch Carter G. Woodson just when you think, man, this guy, when does he sleep? Rayford Logan, who got caught between Du Bois and Woodson on some things, who was still his friend, told Du Bois, I don't know what he did for recreation. But anyway, when you read the journals, you see that Woodson was deliberate in his work and that he was very intolerant. Oh, I can't defend Carter Woodson. It's fascinating. He was a human being. Meaning, you know, we all have our challenges. I remember one passage in the first volume, working with Carter G. Woodson, the father of Black history is what they call it. He was there for a couple of years that first time. I think maybe 1928 to 1930. Check the dates on the journal. Green says that Woodson got in an argument with Charles Wesley. And Woodson and Wesley wrote the Negro in Our History, but Charles Wesley was very different. Charles Wesley was brilliant. Some of y'all, I don't know, does anybody here know, did you know Charles Wesley when he was here in Philadelphia? He was the first director of the museum in 76. So somebody here may have seen him. Charles Wesley, a remarkable figure in his own right, one of the great chroniclers of the African U.S. social elite. So he wrote the history of the Prince Hall Masons, the Elks. He wrote the history of Alpha Alpha. He wrote the history of Sigma Pi Phi. Wrote a history of the AME Church. Wrote a history of Prince Hall, Richard Allen. I mean, it's like this guy is so productive. But he was also an AME Church minister. He also became the president of Wilberforce University at some point. Have you ever seen pictures of him? Very suave, kind of, almost looked like maybe a Harry Lennox kind of, you know who Harry Lennox is, right? Playing the Five Heartbeats, the dude with the deep voice. He's about to play Duke Ellington. Played Adam Clayton Powell in the Keep the Faith Baby. He that kind of, you know, suave kind of dude. You see Charles Wesley. This is a guy who not only was very bright, but also, let's say, he's a social butterfly of sorts. So Woodson wanted him for his mind and his work ethic, but he detested the fact that Wesley was also social. So Green overheard Wesley arguing with Woodson. Woodson telling Wesley, not serious. You need to let some of this other stuff go and concentrate on the work. I need a history of the black church. Now what you gonna do this? Now you gonna be a preacher? These are two men, these are two giants in the field arguing, and it isn't really Wesley arguing, it's Woodson. Finally, Wesley said, I don't have to listen to this, and left. You had to understand that for about 18 months, Carter Woodson worked as a dean at Howard University. At the end of which, he said, I can't do this no more. There's a letter, Moreland Spingarn has some of that correspondence. There's a letter that was sent to Woodson chastising him from the Howard administration because one of the responsibilities of the dean during this period was to go to chapel and make sure the faculty went. And yeah, because they had to go to chapel, Negro College. Woodson was mad because he went to chapel. First of all, he didn't want to go. He said, I don't want to go to chapel and check up on grown folks. Apparently there was a dispute with Elaine Locke. Elaine Locke was Baha'i. And he wasn't going to chapel unless he felt like it. And so Woodson, among other things, took offense. Why I got to go and tell on Elaine Locke, look, these kind of things piled up after a while. Woodson said, okay, that's it. I can't get any research done. I got all these students I'm trying to administer. He was the first one to introduce African-American history as a formal course at black colleges, the first one to put it in the curriculum anywhere during that period. But he left, and he had a house on 9th Street. He lived on the top floor. The next 2 floors in the basement were the association's offices, and that's where they found him dead in April 1950. He worked there for the rest of his life. Never married, never had any kids. And so when he passed, as I say, Logan didn't know. But you know, when you look, it's very fascinating to me. In writing this lesson, in 1937, Woodson started a publication. I'm gonna go through some of the dates in a second. He started a publication called the Negro History Bulletin. That publication was primarily for school teachers. It was for teachers to submit articles and to get articles they could use in the classroom. He wrote curriculum. He didn't do it by himself, he edited it. School teachers from around the country and scholars from around the country and around the world gave articles about famous black people, famous events. You read about blacks in Latin America, the Caribbean, ancient Africa, all this in this magazine, the Negro History Bulletin. And then the little kids started writing. They had crossword puzzles and questions you could ask young people, and then students would submit for essay competitions, and then they would talk about Negro History Week this year and take pictures. Here's a classroom in Richmond, Virginia. Here's Cincinnati, Ohio. Here's one in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And you would see these little vignettes from people, and classes would get together and say, here's what we did. And it's like, wow, this is, it's really rich. And it's all on microfilm, but I want the book. So I buy them whenever I can find them. They come in the little volume. So I have a number of them at the house. And I'll never forget when I finally bought the one. I've really been looking for this volume, because this is the volume from 1950. It's published every month, and then one point every other month.
Oh, for a quick break, for those that made it this far, what's good, Louis? I hope everything's good, brother. Hope everything's good. As you know, if you have any questions or anybody want to come up and give your own take about this, about the history stuff, let me know in the chat room, please. All right. Like the stream, share the stream, and hype the video, and leave comments if you made this far. Let's go.
1950, Woodson died in April. So I want to see May, June, July, 1950. When I looked in there, tributes to Woodson came from the children. And among those tributes were a tribute by a couple of young people, little girls, who knew Carter G. Woodson. And they said he used to come around and take us out for ice cream. It's Washington, D.C. You couldn't find who Woodson hung out with from the adults. when you go through the record, what you find out with, if he spent any rec time at all, he spent at least that time with young people. And not teenagers. He had the youngsters he was training, the college students, the little kids. And I said, well, there he is right there. Never had gotten married, never had any children of his own. But his singular focus was on these young people at that moment, and I'll bracket that in a second. Because, you know, our elders and our children are the ones who are closest to that space that we all connect with all the time, but to which we all return and out of which we all come back. And the Kikongo, the Yoruba, everybody would say it's so significant. And Woodson seemed to live that way because he had a special place in his life for these two groups, and it'll become more evident in a second.
See, even the children love and respect Dr. Carter G. Woodson because he brings not only information, but a sense of self-respect, a self-esteem to the young people to see themselves beyond the word Negroes. That's why a lot of kids love people back in the day like Carter G. Woodson that's trying to build back the self-esteem of Black folks, especially young Black children of that time. I like that. I like that. That was beautiful. Another side note, I've noticed with the education Negro, something's not right. 1 second, guys. I'm gonna let this play. Let's continue. I gotta find something.
So Carter Woodson, give a couple of biographical dates, and then we'll go forward. Actually, I've kind of set most of the markers out. I'm thinking about how things. Just when we encourage each other and keep our spirits up, and I know everybody in here has had encouragement from the ancestral realm in any number of ways. I should mention this while I'm thinking about it. This book that I mentioned, Black History and the Historical Profession, written by two white dudes, August Meyer and Elliot Rudwick. Meyer and Rudwick, for a number of years, were at Kent State University, Kent, Ohio. August Meyer passed away a couple of years ago, Alzheimer's. Spent the last years of his life in a nursing home in New York State. When I first went to Kent State back in the early 90s for a conference, Ed Crosby and some of the people who Pan-African Center there, you know, any place I go to, I'm asking where the bookstore is. So I went to the bookstore, and anytime I go to the bookstore, if I'm gonna give a paper or a talk, I try to go to the bookstore before the talk so that the people from there, I can say, now, I'm ashamed, you should be ashamed that I came into your city and bought this book and this book and this book. Now, how did I go to the bookstore and find these books? Y'all must already have it. So that happened at Kent State. Old white boy with a ponytail. I almost looked like Shaggy, all Scooby-Doo, except he had his hair back in a ponytail, like one of them dead heads or something, you know. I'll go into place. Can I help you? No, I'm just looking. I'm gonna look at all the places, and then if I don't see what I want, I'll come back and ask you. Get to the back, and there's these old books, one big thick book, Bibliography of the Negro in Africa and America, republished by Octagon Press, but it's a reprint of a book that was published, the first major bibliography on African people in the Western Hemisphere, compiled by a dude named Monroe Work. Monroe Work was the director of records and research at Tuskegee for a number of years, and a good friend of Carter Woodson, who also didn't know anything about him. But I bought that book, a couple of other books, and I asked the guy, I said, man, this book is so rare, even the reprint, because it hasn't been reprinted. I think the Octagon Press reprint was maybe 67. It hasn't been reprinted. It's a very important book, because Work tried to put in that book every book he was aware of in English, and some in other languages, but certainly every book in English that had anything to do with Black people. So it's a compendium of all the books at that time. I think the original bibliography was published in the late 20s, 1920s. So he said, oh, those are some of Augie's books that he sold off. August Meyer? Yeah, he lives around here. Huh. Okay, thank you. That was years ago. I didn't know Meyer was sick because he disappeared. I don't know August Meyer, never saw him. One other thing about August Meyer, he came to prominence because Dorothy Porter Wesley, the world is so small. Dorothy Porter Wesley was married to Charles Wesley, but Charles Wesley was her last husband of several. The Porter in her name was for James Porter, who was an art historian at Howard, who she married and died. Then she married Charles Wesley, another of her husbands among several. She was the director of the Moreland Spingarn Library at Howard. Moreland Spingarn, out of the side of Schomburg, is probably the best repository of Africana in the United States. Jesse Moreland was the secretary of the YMCA, the colored YMCA, and he was one of the founders of the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History with Carter Woodson in 1915 on Wabash Avenue in Chicago at the Black YMCA. He agreed to serve as secretary of the original association that Woodson founded, but he didn't really want to because he had been trying to persuade Woodson to take the association to Howard and start it there so he could have an institutional home. But Woodson's thing was, no, I'm not connecting it to anything because none of you Negroes can be trusted. At some point, you go for the money. As I said, Woodson didn't get along with everybody. But Jesse Moreland did agree to work with the association, serve on its first board, and he eventually donated his books to Howard, forming the core of what became the Moreland Spingarn collection. The Spingarn part is from Joel Spingarn. Joel Spingarn and his brother were helpful founders of the NAACP, two white dudes. Major Spingarn, in fact, also spied on the NAACP and other black organizations for the United States military during World War I, unbeknownst to Du Bois and others who supported him, again, underscoring what Woodson was trying to tell them about alliances with our friends. But Spingarn had a big collection of Africana too. He donated it to Howard. So they put them together and called it the Moreland Spingarn Collection. Actually, Woodson won the Spingarn Medal in 1926. The NAACP named its highest honor the Spingarn Award. In fact, it's still the Spingarn Award. But at any rate, Du Bois put him up, nominated him for it. But I'll get to that in a second because he and Du Bois fell out, but that's about something else that Henry Louis Gates plays in that. We'll get to that in a second. In the process of working on his dissertation, August Meyer shows up at Howard. Mrs. Porter at the time, the librarian, knew where everything was in that collection. She'd worked there for a number of years. And when this young white boy showed up, who was working at Tougaloo, I think, at the time in Mississippi, he worked at black colleges a number of years, wrote his memoir, A White Scholar in the Black.
All right, I found the original book I have, the physical book I have. This book is actually condensed, but when I'm looking at the PDF of this book, it is the same information. I think with the PDF, they kind of broke it down. That's why it's more pages from what I'm understanding. So it makes a lot more sense per se. It is somewhat the same book, but the one I got is more smaller print. So I do got the real book. It's a little difficult to read, but it is what it is. All right, let's go.
Community. Tie all this together in a second. He shows up, says, I want to write about black organizations, Negro organizations. Mrs. Porter is like, well, that's important and it's good work, but let me tell you, there are a number of black organizations that haven't been written about and a lot of figures that are very important. And you know, we have a lot of those documents here. In fact, let me show you. And she guided him through unprocessed materials and primary documents that enabled him to write a book called Negro Thought in America, from the 1880s to the death of Booker T. Washington in 1915, that set the standard for African American history and helped train a generation of black scholars, including the author of the African American history textbook we have, Darlene Clark Hine. So many of these black scholars bow down to August Meyer. He became known in some ways as the dean of African American history because a black woman showed him where the documents were. It's very interesting. I ain't mad at August Meyer and I ain't mad at Dorothy Porter, but I'm just telling you the genealogy, which will become evident in a minute. So this book comes very important because he knows these documents. It's very important to read that. Oh, he's a white man, I'm not gonna read him. Okay, well then you go on over there into ignorance. I'm gonna read every page in here and get the documents back. Duh. But we'll go back and reconstruct them then. You go look for all the documents. I'm gonna start here. It's like reading a phone book, basically. But in this process, Meyer was sick, didn't know he was sick. I was in New York, Strand bookstore, my hands and knees. I see a copy of this, but I got like 2 copies of it now. In fact, this is the one I went and bought after I marked up the library's copy. And I won't write in this one because I bought this one at Borders after I finished reading the other one. I said, well, I'm gonna keep this one on the shelf. I kept the other one too, I just paid for it. I know they'd buy another one. Anyway, that was during the period when I was hanging out with old heads and ASCAC who were known for liberating books from the library. They just, if they went through the proper process of checking them out, that was good. Most of the time, one would be outside, and the other one would be at the window, and they would be dry. Like, come on, man, y'all can't do that. At least check the book out, pay for it, man, so they can replace it. But after I'd marked all that, I had no intention of marking in it. I was just going down like, oh wow, I need to. And by the time I look, I say, I'm not taking this back. I need this because this is going to remind me. So I take this one out. The other one I don't even take out. But at any rate, I saw that and I said, well, I got a copy of that. And then I saw one of the Woodson Journal books, Selling Black History for Carter G. Woodson. Well, I already had a copy of that too. But I said, it was hardback. You don't see those. So I picked it up to Augie. Well, thank you for guiding my research in the field of African American history, R.B. Strickland. Okay, I'm gonna take that. Now I'm looking. There's Black Milwaukee. Now I got a copy of Joe Trotter's book. Let me pull this. It's a hardback too. To August Meyer for the influence you had in guiding me to the study of Black history, Joe Trotter. Darlene Clark Hines' books on the white primary, Blacks in Nursing, History of Black Women in Indianapolis, all of them inscribed to her mentor, Augie Meyer. So I didn't pay the rent. I had to borrow for the rent because I bought everything I could find that was inscribed to him. Why? Here is the evidence, the smoking gun. You Negroes stand up. I see what you did. Now, I know it could have been gratuitous, but the thing that struck me as well is, how did August Meyer's books that were written, inscribed to him, end up here? He may have Alzheimer's and gone into another space, but what regard did his family have? Did they have to sell to pay the bills? No, this guy was well enough off. I don't know what the circumstances were, but it strikes me that as much as these black people love what you did for them, how come all the books at my house? You understand? I'm like, well, we doggone. But it closed full circle for me a couple of years ago, what began with this book. This is encouragement. I don't care about August Meyer, I could care less. But what that enabled me to reinscribe in my mind is the importance of doing the work and understanding the implications, which brings me back to Woodson. I've never seen a Carter G. Woodson inscribed book, but I was in Emory about 3 years ago doing a workshop on Africana Studies for the Department of Africana Studies, and Emory, as you all probably know, university is Coca-Cola money, the Candler family. In fact, Asa was the Fuller E. Calloway Professor of Urban Education at Georgia State. They got a Calloway building at Emory. The Calloways, the Chandlers, the Candlers rather, all this stuff is interrelated. This Coca-Cola money, this urban South, post-Civil War, Reconstruction, New South, not plantocracy, but these neo-Southern races. That's their thing. Emory is their flagship. I said, why y'all call it Emory? You should just call it Coca-Cola University. Be done with it. So they take me to the top floor of the library, special collections. This white boy named Randall Burkett, who used to work with Henry Louis Gates, is in charge of special collections. Brian's not in saying, I know you know Burkett. I'm up there. Burkett loves bragging about how he got a blank checkbook to buy whatever he want black, including, painfully, much of the collection of the Association for the Study of Afro-American Life and History, who several years ago sold the private library of Carter G. Woodson to Emory University because they needed money. That's their excuse. Anyway, I don't buy it, never.
Yeah, I'm just looking at some research, guys. Make sure you like the stream, share the stream. It's very good information so far. I'm liking this. Let's keep going.
Will. A lot of these Negroes are indeed the grandchildren of August Meyer. You see, so their idea of institution building has more to do with what book they published and what university they're at and how they can meet at conferences and be each other's friends than it does about building independent institutions, so that the founder of the association that they're now in charge of, his private library is down in Emory, sitting in a special collection being presided over by a vulture named Randall Burkett. So Burkett brings out this book, W.C. Handy, Father of the Blues. On the title page it says, to the father of Negro history from the father of the blues, W.C. Handy. He got it in his hands. And I just wanted to say, oh man, that's a... But you can't do that. We're academics after all. So I couldn't take it from him, so I decided, well, okay, I'm gonna get the white boy. So I came out of my bag with a history of the story of Negro history, a description of the courses in Negro history being taught at black colleges around the country, edited by John G. Jackson and Willis Huggins. And he said, "Oh, can I see? I've heard of that." "Yeah, I'm sure you have. But you ain't gonna touch this. So go home tonight and sleep, because it's an obsession for him. He wants everything black he can find. The more rare, the better." He had a collection of stuff from an esotericist in Savannah, Georgia, including her crystal ball. He just tossing it around. This is I wonder. Oh, I can't see anything. Yeah, fool, keep handling it. And when your fingers fall off in a couple of years and you go to that great Emory Hospital and they can't do nothing for you except send you home, the laughter you hear is going to be that black woman in your ear. But my point is that Woodson, I've never seen anything inscribed by him, but I've seen things inscribed to him. Woodson was part of a community that recognized his worth even if he wasn't close to anybody. And so let me kind of wind this together, and as I go through the chronology, it'll become very apparent. Carter Woodson, in the lesson that we wrote, comes alive, we hope, in ways that school teachers can use their young people, can use to help their young people ask different kind of questions. I won't read the lesson to you, but I'll read a couple of small passages. The beginning of the lesson starts with 3 quotes. The first one is probably the most important quote for February of any year, because we all laugh and tell the same jokes. It's the shortest month of the year. That's why it's Black History Month, this kind of thing. Negro History Week, this is from Woodson editorial 1943, the Negro History Bulletin. Negro History Week is the week set aside by the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History for the purpose of emphasizing what has already been learned about the Negro during the year. Well, there it is. This is the time when we're supposed to be talking about what we did the other 11 months. It's remarkable, isn't it, when you think about it? If Woodson was sitting here now, and of course he is here, but if he was physically sitting here, given his proclivity to be irascible and kind of cantankerous, I shudder to think. In fact, we included primary documents, as Dana always talks about it with the school teachers. Here's something from March 1950. This is the month before he died, from the Negro History Bulletin. The title of this article, "No Study, and consequently, no celebration." Woodson said, "Well, we didn't do our work this year, so I ain't gonna call off Negro History. We can't do it, it's too big now, but I really don't feel like celebrating." He says, "It is evident from the numerous calls for orators during Negro History Week that schools and their administrators do not take the study of the Negro seriously enough to use Negro History Week as a short period for demonstrating what the students have learned in their study of the Negro during the whole school year." So all these Negroes run around filling up their bank accounts, and what they now take to calling behind people's backs Green History Week, Green History Month. Where you going this week? Where you going this week? Where you going this week? Where they paying you? I don't take money. I troll, man. Unless money falling out of people's pockets and they say, you have to take the money. Woodson said, "It is evident from you asking all these people to come that y'all don't take doing it during the year seriously." I'm gonna blow that up and put it on there. Who's coming for Negro History Week? Here. There you go, from the founder. Don't call during February. March the 1st, phone better be ringing off the hook. Better yet, June 15th, August 23rd. Do that. April 15th, somebody say, "I want you to come in and talk about slavery as a function of the taxing power of the United States and how the American taxation system was built on the appropriation of African labor and how they built the tax code around that. Ultimately, a century later, when they put the federal income tax into place, it was built on the premise that this is how you build revenue." I need somebody black to tell me about that. Why? It's April 15th. It's a beautiful thing. I mean, Woodson is no joke. He said, "Those with ambitions in the present will thus gain renewed vigor in their efforts to battle with present-day obstacles and finally overcome in the struggle of life if you teach Negro youth their history year-round." The purpose of doing it year-round is so that they see every day examples of how to get out of the mess they're in. If you just keep it in that week, you just defeated the purpose. Rather, don't call me. Beautiful thing. This is from Carter Woodson. So at any rate, so we have that first quote. The second quote, this is the meaning of Negro History Week. It is not so much a Negro History Week as it is a history week. We should emphasize Not Negro history, but the Negro in history. What we need is not a history of selected races or nations, but the history of the world void of national bias, race hate, and religious prejudice. His last sentence is powerful. This is from 1927, the year after he started it. He says, there should be no indulgence in undue eulogy of the Negro. Don't feel sorry for us. We don't need your pity. He says, the case of the Negro is well taken care of when it is shown how he has influenced the development of civilization. So don't do anything special, just tell the facts. But we know that's not going to happen. Why? Because the facts are going to upset the balance. And as I was saying earlier, when Dorothy, when you showed us this National Geographic a couple of weeks ago at the meeting with the black pharaohs, as Jacob Carruthers would say, do not snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. The recent National Geographic with Piaye or Pianki, Shabaka, Taharka, the 25th dynasty in Kemet, the black pharaohs, of course, take away the adjective black or the article and says what? The pharaohs. No, it has to be black. Why? They've given us the 25th dynasty, but we've had that for a long time. The question becomes, why are you conceding the 25th? Because you know imminently we're taking the whole Nile Valley back. And if we look very quickly, even though that's the 25th dynasty, if you flip through here, you see, and you said it was very interesting, and I agree with you. I took it to Howard. The kids had a great time with this. You see Queen Kawit from the 11th dynasty getting her locks twisted, sipping on maybe some herbal tea or something a little stronger, I don't know. Mirror in other hand, the sister in the back, twisting her locks. Got the little pin in there to keep her place. It's not a perm. And then you go a couple of pages later, and the grandmother of Tutankhamun, as Leonard Jeffries always likes to show us this picture, Queen T. And of course, the caption says, did the powerful Queen T, King Tut's grandmother, have Nubian ancestry? This bust, made of wood that has darkened with age, has inspired claims that she did. Like he called himself a professor. They call her black. Meaning what? This ain't 1920. This is not George Wells Parker writing in the Negro History Bulletin about the Greeks. This is not Du Bois writing in 1915, his book, The Negro, where he refutes this stuff. This is 2008, and they still trying to trick black people. But they have a lot of resources. We'll give you the 25th. No, we're taking it all. We will not snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. You understand? Thank you. But, thank you. But it goes back to what Woodson said 80 years ago, 81 years ago. The case of the Negro is well taken care of when it is shown how the influence over the entire civilization is there. Just show what we did. No one you do eulogy. And then finally, finally I'll read you the quote from the end of the lesson. I love that quote. It's a beautiful quote. This is a quote from Mary Bethune. Mary Bethune took over the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History for Carter Woodson in the late 1940s, and she was the president of the association when he died. She wrote in 1950, that same issue of the Negro History Bulletin that had the school children in it, Mary Bethune wrote something, and she said, I shall always believe in Carter Woodson. He helped me to maintain my faith in myself. He gave me renewed confidence in the capacity of my race for development and in the capacity of my country for justice, for her own people and for all peoples. With the power of cumulative fact, he moved back the barriers and broadened our vision of the world and the world's vision of us. Now, you know, Ms. Bethune was a dedicated believer in the idea of America, but she wasn't naive. But for her to say that about Woodson was very powerful, because it spoke to one giant speaking to another one. And she talked really about, in this longer article, she talks about what that influence of Woodson meant to her. Let me give a couple of dates and then wind to find a couple of statements. Woodson was born in New Canton, Virginia, 1875. It's important to note that, in fact, because December 19th, 1875, his mother and father, James and Eliza, had been enslaved. He followed his two older brothers into the coal mines of Virginia, where he worked until he was 20 years old. Then he was finally able to be relieved of the duties of helping the family earn an income, and he could finally attend high school full time. He finished that course of study in less than 2 years, went on to college, Berea College in Kentucky. Integrated at the time, but then they went into resegregated after Woodson had left. It's very interesting. His mother and father came out of slavery, but they made sure all of their children, all the boys and girls, learned how to read. Eliza was a stickler about that. You know, it's amazing to me, there are very few books on Woodson, biographies. Jacqueline Goggin has one, Carter G. Woodson, A Life in Black History. In fact, it's the only one. There are articles and things like that, but Woodson, you know, but I remember reading that and thinking about it, because the beautiful thing is that Woodson wrote, he didn't write a lot about himself, but what he wrote about himself really is very telling. I talked about the young people, the little kids. Now let me talk about the elders for a moment. Woodson left home at 17, working first for the railroads and then following his 2 older brothers into the coal mines of Virginia. One of the men he worked the mines with, Oliver Jones, operated a room in his home stocked with fruit, drinks, and ice cream for the other miners. When Woodson let it be known he could read, he assumed his next community service role. In exchange for free goodies, Woodson read the newspapers to those men. In exchange for reading the newspapers to those men told them the stories of their lives. And they told Woodson the stories about, among other things, being veterans of the Civil War. Woodson made a promise to them that one day, if he ever got into space, he would repeat those stories for posterity. The reason I know that is because you can read his article, My Recollection of Veterans of the Civil War. It's in the Negro History Bulletin, February 1944. He kept his promise. This is a man who, as a teenager, read to old folks who became older men to him, but who had passed away by the time he got in the place where he could tell their story, but he kept his promise to them. This was his dedication. Our history isn't just our experiences. In fact, it's not our experiences. It's the experiences of our people. This was Woodson's primary objective in starting the Journal of Negro History. Let me continue. So he came out of that coal mine. He finishes high school. He goes to teach school. Now, there's another book called Carter G. Woodson, A Biobibliography by Sister Anthony.
All right. Hope you guys still there. I mean, I know most people find this to be, you know, boring, but this is something that was part of history. And like I said, this is a dedication of 100 years since he created Negro History Week, and it eventually become a actual national month in 1976, 50 years now, around this time. So let's keep going. Make sure you guys leave comments, your thoughts and opinions, and enjoy.
Anthony Scally, it's a nun who wrote this piece. In her chronology, she has, and I haven't been able to track this down anywhere else, it has in 1897, from September to December, he attended Lincoln University. Yeah, so I've been looking for that. Now, I haven't been out to Lincoln yet. I'm sure they know about it. But he was only there for several months, if he was there at all. I have no reason to doubt Sister Scally, because she wrote this book a long time ago when people who knew Carter Woodson was still alive. And it could have been that he was enrolled there for a while. But what is clear is that in 1898, for 2 years, he taught school in Winona, West Virginia. One of the things we gave the school teachers last year was a copy of Carter G. Woodson's teacher certification. And we said, look at his certification and look at yours. All the subjects he had to know, grammar and geometry. And this is to teach in the West Virginia segregated public schools. And the marks he achieved, 97, 93, 92, 98. It's like this guy across the board. Now you go teach. He was a public school teacher. Then he went to Douglas High School in Huntington, West Virginia for 3 years before he went to the University of Chicago. He left the University of Chicago in 1903 and taught in the Philippines for 4 years. This is all public schools. This is important to know. Woodson was a school teacher. He was a scholar, but he's a teacher. He honed his craft as a teacher before he went into full-bred scholarship. Came back to the University of Chicago, went to graduate school there, got the master's in August 1908, and from there went to Harvard for a year. He completed the coursework for a PhD in a year. This is a man who came out the coal mine in West Virginia. You understand? So, I mean, it's a beautiful story. I mean, when I think of 3 of the most important people in our intellectual history in terms of educators. Mary Bethune coming out of the fields of South Carolina. You know, Benny Mays up the road from her in 96, South Carolina, coming out of a tobacco field, was 20 years old before he could go to high school. And Carter G. Woodson out the coal mines in West Virginia. There's no excuse. You ask young people, when do you expect to graduate? I got love back. I'm going to graduate when I'm 20. Okay, Woodson started when he was 20. It's okay. In other words, if you make up your mind, this is why we wanted to use Woodson, right? Not just for what he did, but how he did it. So young people can read this and realize it's never too late. You know, and then if you work hard enough, you can do things other people say, wow, it's just Harvard. What is Harvard to me? Woodson was the second black person to get a PhD from Harvard. The first was Du Bois, but he was the first and will be the only one ever to be the one, a son of enslaved Africans. Because Du Bois' parents were born out in Massachusetts. And Du Bois didn't know his father. His father got his mother pregnant. They stayed around for a while and then left. So people say, oh, I don't know my father. Neither did Du Bois. What's your point? This is not an issue. Do your work. Do your work. Ain't nobody standing there saying you can't work. Put that book down. And there was a time when that was true, both of those things. So at any rate, Woodson then goes to D.C. He teaches at the M Street School, which is now Dunbar School. Oh yeah, he taught at high school there. And Judy Cooper taught there too. They taught school. Then he went to Howard, said, nah, Went, bought that house, started his work. 1914, he joined the American Negro Academy. By then, the ANA had been around for almost 20 years. It was founded in 1897, along with the Yonkers Society for Historical Research in 1911, and Philadelphia's own Society for Historical Research, 1897, I guess it is. I heard somebody say during Kwanzaa that after the fall of the University of Sankara at Timbuktu, there were no libraries or learning societies for black people until the appearance of this society in Philadelphia in 1897. This person claimed to be a scholar. It's really an embarrassment for anybody to say that, if say they're a student of African history. But I understand where it came from, trying to get a rise out of the crowd. Black people have always had these spaces. What distinguishes Woodson's space from many of the other spaces is that he was calling for black people who had gone to university to use those skills for the community. Because, you know, if that little parlor in Jones's house where the ice cream and sodas were, where he was reading to those men, is not a study group, I don't know what is. In fact, that's a more important study group. Because these guys said, okay, young buck, you can read. So you sit here and tell us what they said in Richmond. What's in the Planet? What's in the Indianapolis, what's the name of the Indianapolis Recorder? What's in the New York Age? Read to us. And Woodson is doing his duty. So at any rate, we could talk about a number of the books that he published. 1915, he publishes not the Miseducation of the Negro, the Education of the Negro prior to 1915. In that book, he praises Booker T. Washington. He liked Booker T. Washington a lot. He liked Marcus Garvey a lot. There are people, you know, we got pros and cons on both sides of the issue, but the Miseducation of the Negro was not published until 1933. So 18 years before the Miseducation of the Negro, which, by the way, if he knew this was the one book that we all know he wrote, I think Woodson might get violent, physically violent, because these were newspaper articles in the Miseducation of the Negro that got put into a book. He didn't mean for this to be his legacy, I'm sure, although he'd be satisfied to know that people are still reading something he wrote. He was a historian.
Yeah, but they're reading something they wrote.
So before he wrote the Miseducation of the Negro, he wrote the Education of the Negro prior to 1860, meaning what? Before the Civil War was over, black people were educating each other. If you read James Anderson's book, The Education of the Negro in the South, what you find is that when the so-called Freedmen's Bureau came south and was like, we want to help y'all, black people said two things. Number one, we already started. There's a school in Virginia was started in 1833 by a black woman, deep up in slavery. Enslaved. How did you start a school for black people in 1830, 32 years before the end of the Civil War? So the first thing they said was, we've already started. And the second thing they told them was, thanks, but no thanks. You see, we have experience with white people. And so we'll take some money, but what we don't need is your teachers. And so what you see in the Freedmen's Bureau records is they're writing back saying these Negroes don't want us to teach their children. They said, we'll take the money, the help, but we don't need the teachers. So you know, it's very interesting. You know, I mean, you know our attitude toward that now. But you can imagine if we came out of slavery and white people said, we're going to help you. No, it's all right, thanks, you've helped enough. I'm speaking English, you're understanding it, I can understand what you're saying. It's cold, I'm ashy. No, you helped enough, quite enough. Let us teach our children. Woodson writes a book about that in 1915. He also starts the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History with its meetings. Very quickly, just a couple of quick ones. 1926, he started Negro History Week, and that's the year he got the Spingarn Medal. 1937, he started the Negro History Bulletin. And if I had to pick 3 books that he did, nearly 24 manuscripts, either he wrote, co-authored, or helped to put into print, I would say that, let me see if I could pick a couple. Yeah. 2 that'll count as 1. Negro Orations and Their Orators and the Mind of the Negro. These are 2 books. Negro Orations and Orators is the speeches black people gave in the 18th century, the 19th century. It's a big old thick book of just speeches. John Russ Worm, Mariah Stewart, Henry Highland Garnett. He said, I'm just gonna put a little preface on this and just fill up the book with speeches. Here, Frederick Douglass. Go read what black people said. This is when he did, in the Journal of Negro History, much of what he would do, I would just publish documents. In fact, he would put something in the journal and say, send us your documents. Black people, if you got stuff in your attic, in your basement, letters from your family, send it to us, we'll publish it. We just want to put it out there so that you can go and look for yourself. The other one, The Mind of the Negro, was letters black people wrote to each other. The Mind of the Negro, as reflected in letters written during the crisis, 1800 to 1860. Just correspondence. Now I'm wondering today, here we are in 2008, and I'm saying people are teaching African American history and talking about Carter G. Woodson and say the miseducation of the Negro. I'm like, no, just go get those 2 volumes, 2 big old telephone books worth of stuff. He's not even writing, he's just putting the stuff out. 2 more books, I love this one. Negro Makers of History, which was published with another book called African Myths, together with Proverbs. These are books for children. He wrote a book called African Myths, together with Proverbs. This is a book that if you take it, I used it sometime for Freedom School in the summertime. I go out to a site, all elementary school children, and take that book and have one read the story, and others got to act it out. I need 5 people. And they'll pick a story out of there, and they act it out. And every proverb, every story in there at the end has a question. One the kids did one summer, I remember, it's about 2-3 years ago. The story of the princess and the 3 suitors, and the 3 suitors wanted the princess, so each one of them tried to do something for the princess, and it didn't work. And at the end of the day, some kind of way, they ended up tricking each other. And then Woodson stops the story. Then the question becomes, what should each of them do now to achieve their goal? And to see these little 7, 8, 9-year-old black girls and boys trying to figure out this was Woodson's point. It ain't about telling you the end of the story. I'm gonna fill this book up and make you think. Now this book was published in 1928. We got children's literature now that's brilliant. We got some stuff that's worthless. But Woodson's book is not in print. And I dare say that the original copies of it, including anything he may have signed, are now at Emory. But at any rate, finally, the miseducation of the Negro, of course. Woodson got so mad at black people by 1932, 33. He had fought with all his buddies, a couple of highlights in that. 1932, in fact, this was published in 33. The year before that, he got into a fight with Du Bois, Arthur Schomburg, Alain Locke, with all these Negroes. Woodson fought everybody. It was like everybody over here fighting each other or getting along, and then Woodson come and they all be against Woodson or Woodson be against all of them. His consistent refrain was, if you take money from white people at some point, they're gonna tell you what to do. But Woodson took money from white people too. But then the money dried up because he refused to do what they told him to do. The fight started over something called the Encyclopedia of the Negro. Thomas Jesse Jones, white dude, and the Phelps Stokes Fund said, we're gonna do an Encyclopedia of the Negro. So they went and asked all these famous black people to come. Benjamin Brawley they asked. They asked Francis Grimke. They asked Artelia Cromwell. They asked Arthur Schomburg. They all came and met at Howard University. 2 people were not invited. Du Bois and Carter Woodson. So when they all got there, John Hope, who was president of Atlanta University, said, we can't have no meeting without Woodson and Du Bois. What are you trying to do? So the fund wrote Du Bois, wrote Woodson and said, will you please join us? Du Bois, mad because he wasn't on the list to begin with. But ego, bigger than everyone in the whole world, says, well, I was upset, but who was I to let my personal feelings stand in the way of the progress of this project I accept? Because you can't do it without me. In other words, so he's, Woodson, hell no, I'm not coming. So they meet, the next year they meet, and they're all there except Woodson, and the first order of business is, can we get Carter Woodson? John Hope said, I tried. I talked to him. That's my friend. In fact, I wanted him to move the association to Atlanta University so he could have some support. He said, no, I'm not coming down there. Because I don't think there's a Negro college in the country that will be able to support what we're doing. And Fisk was, at that time, probably the best example, and Charles Johnson was getting all kind of money from the foundations. Woodson says, see, I told you, Johnson's not serious, writes like a child. That's how, if you read Woodson's correspondence, he wrote Du Bois a letter after Du Bois wrote it and said, please, will you join? Because they made Du Bois the co-editor. Well, that sealed it. Of course Woodson is not coming. Woodson wrote him back and said, I have my own project we're working on, and you write like a child. And I was like, man, this guy was really mad. He's like, no. He said, plus, these things you will not be able to control it. The Depression hit several years. It was the Depression that hit in 1929. They decided they didn't have the money to fund it. In the wake of this, they only published one little volume called the Encyclopedia of the Negro, preparatory volume. Very hard to find. I got one at home. In fact, I think I got August Meyer's copy. But at any rate, not from the Strand or Kent State, from another place. But at any rate, looking at Woodson after that, Rayford Logan was friends with Du Bois and friends with Carter Woodson. He tried to make peace between them, and in the end got beat up by both of them. Woodson was like, that's your friend? Okay, we'll go over there with your friend then. Woodson wouldn't let anybody interrupt him, but one of his weaknesses was he did all the work himself or with people who were loyal to him, which is why, as I wind up, 1947, white publisher named Alfred Knopf came to a young scholar, fine young scholar in fact, a man who was named for one of Du Bois's friends, that president of Atlanta University, a man who went to Fisk and studied and majored in history because Du Bois had gone to Fisk, a man who got his PhD from Harvard in history because Du Bois had gotten his from Harvard, and a man who, when he first told Du Bois all these things when he first met him, said Du Bois never looked up from his newspaper where he was eating dinner because Du Bois had a tight schedule and he kept that schedule his whole life, in bed by 10 o'clock, early doing writing, and when he had time for dinner and reading the paper, that's what he was doing. He ain't talking to people. So when he told him all those things, he said at the end when he said, I went to Harvard and got a PhD because you did, he looked up and said, how do you do? The man I'm talking about, the man who Alfred Knopf came to and said, we need a textbook in African American history because we don't have one that we have. Meaning what? Woodson had the only textbooks and they were being sold by black people. That young man named John Hope Franklin agreed, and he wrote a book called From Slavery to Freedom. That book's still in print and still most used textbook in the country. But it was written by the first major historian in African America who was not trained by or otherwise directly affiliated with Carter G. Woodson. And that's no knock against John Hope Franklin, but it's understanding what Woodson said was absolutely correct. They're not going to rest until they take us. And John Franklin, who is still hale and hearty in his 90s, born 1915, John Franklin is one of the most eloquent, passionate, and convicted defenders of and believers in the mission of Carter Woodson. He's a Woodson fan. Doesn't take away the fact that Woodson was right. I'm going to stop with that.
83 pages.
Say that hopefully as our young people
83 pages. Right here.
Explore the life of Carter Woodson, because much of this is in the lesson, they'll get a sense that one can stand against the forces that oppose us.
So this is short.
And one can win. And that one doesn't have to win in one's own lifetime, although one can get some satisfaction with remaining independent. If one has built for eternity, one will, as the theme of our conference this year says, one will endure for eternity. Because if you've inscribed it, it remains there for us to read. It's just for us to go back and connect. And Carter Woodson is the type of man I think we should probably continue to connect with.
All right, guys, make sure you hit the like button and share the stream.
Stop with that. And
All right, I think that's pretty much it. Give me one moment, guys. I'm just gonna do something quickly. So I'm gonna take a quick pause. Be patient. Sorry, guys. I'm just doing some a multitask right now, as you could tell. And it's very interesting. In conclusion to all this, and I was going to say something about the educational part of things, guys. And this is my thing with education today. For people that don't know, my problem with education, right? Hold on a second, guys. Hold on. All right, and wrapping up this thing, I apologize, guys. It was paused, so the stream isn't over. It's just I was multitasking for those that know. The one thing I have to say this, and I gotta say this, right? Education as it stands today, we are at a stage where we are usually people are leading or moving towards idiocracy. Now, there was a movie that came out, I forgot it was in the last 20 years or something. And that movie displays where education has been and where it has always been going. And that is dumbing down and stupefying and retarding the population. And the people that's coming before us, that if you're not a Generation X or millennial, the whole angle is to dumb down the Gen Zs to be the new waves of people that's going to be in what I call idiots or idiocracies. I had a conversation with gentlemen about this personally, and my views about education is always as it stands that, especially in America, the whole intention is to dumb you down for a more greater goal, and the goal is more control. And we can even go as far as subjugation. America is not in the business trying to educate its population to be productive. Its goal is to dumb you down as quickly and as fast as possible for a bigger intention. So I'm not going to stress more on this. I'd like to thank everybody for listening to today's stream. Like I said, this is Carter G. Woodson's 100th anniversary of creating what we now know as Black History. We now consider, or it has now been called, Black History Month. If you have any issues, disagreements, leave your thoughts in the comment sections. If there's a hype video on this video, please hype this video. Let's get this video to 100 views, at least. I know most of this channel is slow and stuff, but every little help, every little view, every little comment helps. So please, and like the video as well. It goes on way. That's it. Thank y'all for watching today's stream. Until next time, take care.